You're listening to Anywhere But Hollywood with Adam Campbell, empowering the independent filmmaker.
Come in. Sit down. Did he hurt you?
No.
You can talk to me here. You're safe here.
My dad is, he's turning into a monster.
You brave enough to play Geronimo?
No way.
You're chicken.
I'm not. Besides, what if the ladder broke?
Like I said, you're chicken.
So I think this knife is sharp enough to cut all the way through. Sterilized it with the matches. Got my camera strap as a tourniquet. Undershirt for a bandage. Best part, got my own morphine.
This was so much fun. This was a we did a roundtable with 4 Dollar Baby film creators. Stephen King's Dollar Babies. If you don't know what it is, Stephen King's had a program in place for a few decades now, whereby up-and-coming filmmakers can obtain the rights to one of a selection of stories that he makes available for $1, and with the stipulation that the film can't be shown just anywhere publicly, can't be put online, and no profit can be made from this film. But regardless of these stipulations, these restrictions, there have been a lot of really, really high quality films made this way, and a really rich subculture of filmmakers has grown up around the Dollar Babies. And as you'll hear from each of our 4 guests here, even with the restrictions placed upon them, these films have been instrumental in their careers. So let's get to it. This is our first ever Dollar Baby Roundtable. We are all here.
We're here.
Welcome.
Introduce yourselves, everybody.
Go ahead. Start with Billy, since you're the last one in. You can be the first one out.
This is Bill Hanson, and I directed Survivor Type.
Mm-hmm. That's all you're going to say?
I don't know. Should I say more?
Well, is there more to you than
Aries?
that? All right. Let's go with, how about Mr. Thron?
Hey, I'm Daniel Thron. I co-directed Last One on the Ladder with James Cole.
Jim.
And
Cole.
that'll lead to me. May as well lead to me. I'm James Cole. I co-directed Last Ring on the Ladder with Dan Thron.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
And I'm James Cox. I directed Gray Matter.
All by yourself.
One of the Gray Matters.
Oh, yeah. That was actually one of the questions. Go ahead.
2 Last Rungs.
What was that?
There are actually 2 Last Rungs.
Okay, let's start with that, because that was actually one of the questions I had listed. Is these Dollar Baby? All right, we shouldn't start with that. First, there may be some people in the world who don't know what a Dollar Baby is. Who wants to take that one on?
Want to take it on, Dan, or Billy, or James?
I'd say the senior member should take that on.
That would be Jim and Dan. Go for it.
That would be me. Well, a little background. Last Ring on the Ladder is one which I call the first generation Dollar Babies.
Super 8, in other words.
Well, no, that actually is not what I mean. But yes, it is Super 8. No, I mean that the very first one was ever done was 1982, and ours was 87. And then there was a big period of none until the internet kind of broke through.
Okay, Jim, what is a Dollar Baby?
A Dollar Baby is an arrangement that Stephen King has made with student filmmakers since 1977. And it means that he allows student filmmakers, I think as young as high school, or as old as college, but you can't be a pro in terms of, you can't have been in the industry or written or directed a feature, to adapt short stories only for $1. Now, the reason he does that is because you are actually not owning or getting the rights. You don't really even have an option. It's basically a one-time deal to do an adaptation that can then be shown for your reel. It can be shown at festivals with his permission, but it cannot be on the internet, and you can never have a deal for home video. It can never be shown in that regard.
So how did you, back in the day, in the ancient of days, how did you find out about that program? Given that there was no internet to speak of.
Castle Rock, the Stephen King newsletter. I only remember that like writing last night. Dan and I went to the Starlog Festival in April 1985 in Boston.
That's right.
And picked up a couple issues of the Stephen King newsletter, which had just debuted that January. And there was some article in it that indicated that King let student filmmakers do this.
You guys, you
And
don't
that's
still
the-
have like copies of the old Castle Rock?
Yeah, it's in a box in the basement, but I have it.
Oh wow, that's cool. All right.
That's awesome.
I miss those times when you had like bantha tracks and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
right. The Star
That
Wars.
was awesome. I used to do that all the
I
time.
actually subscribe to that too. Yeah.
If memory serves, the dealer, I love the word dealer, was a book dealer. It was a great bookstore called Time Tunnel. His name was Craig Godden. He's passed away since then, and I bought like tons of Star Trek photo novels and, Stephen King paperbacks and so much stuff from this guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was awesome.
So why don't we talk a little bit about each of your films? All right. So let's start with Billy, just for the heck of it. I don't know. He's looking at me all. That picture looks like a little puppy dog. So
Yeah.
go ahead, Billy. You can talk now.
Well, I did an adaptation of Survivor Type. It was not the first one I found out after I had sort of already gotten it going. There was one that was produced the year before, and they were finishing up their festival run right as I was starting mine, which was kind of interesting. And we actually screened together at one of the festivals at the Atlanta Horror Festival. Apparently, they screened one right after the other.
Oh, that's kind of weird. How did that go?
Yeah. I wasn't able to attend it, but we had someone out there, and they were like, yeah, it was a little bit weird. It was kind of interesting to see like two different perspectives on the same story, but it was a little bit weird because when you watch the second one, you just know what's going to happen.
Yeah. And did they take the same kind of approach where it was like a video diary as yours?
Actually, no. And I haven't seen their full film, but I think theirs focused more on like the backstory, or focused a lot on the backstory, whereas I just had like a few lines here and there that mentioned the like the drug history and like how he's smuggling drugs and that kind of stuff.
So they almost make they could almost work as companion pieces with each other.
Yeah. I like to think so.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, James Cox, tell us.
Yes. So I directed Gray Matter, which there's actually been I guess is there a couple or is there a few? I'm not sure. I know of at least one other.
James, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to give you guys a real helpful place to look and find out where all the Dollar Babies are listed. Wikipedia. Type in Dollar Baby. Jay Holben, who directed Paranoid, created the entire page.
Oh.
It is a thorough research and breakdown of the whole history of the Dollar Babies and a listing of every known Dollar Baby to this day.
It's amazing.
That's fantastic.
Does he maintain that? Does he keep updating it himself, or is that just?
I don't know when he last updated it, but it's pretty good. So go ahead, James. Sorry.
Yeah, no. That's I think that's a really helpful resource for the listeners. In fact, if they're listening right now, they can check it out.
Yeah, and we'll put the link in the show notes, of course.
Excellent. So directed Gray Matter. We actually shot in 2009. It didn't get finished until about 2011. I was in college. What can I say? But it was a film I'm very proud of. We won a few awards at different festivals, including Vail and in Big Bear there's a couple other versions, I believe. One of them I haven't had a chance to see, but I've seen the trailer by Red Clark, which is pretty exciting. But he also took a very different take with the story, which I think is fascinating. How these Dollar Babies, when done by different filmmakers, can be really interpreted differently.
Yeah. That's.
Well, one thing that intrigued me, James, watching yours today, was that you made a lot of departures from the original story yourself. You turned it much into more of a Boy Who Cried Wolf story than was the original, and yet it still feels very much like the original story.
Yeah, well, I had to choose a perspective. Was kind of like where I started on that, and I felt like the story is kind of the way it's laid out in the short story is that this kid goes to his dad's bar and basically tells them what's going on, and they need to come out and see his dad, and the whole story is kind of framed that way, like an old TV episode, where somebody goes, "You won't believe what I just saw," and then they cut to everything that happened, and the way that I thought that was constructed, well, I wanted to kind of get more in that kid's head, and from that point I wanted the audience to be with him through the whole story, and kind of using the parable, like you said, of the Boy Who Cried Wolf, I was able to kind of, I think, crystallize it as a short film a little bit more, make it kind of, I don't know, a little bit easier to get set into in a really short amount of time. And I I definitely I don't know. I know I took some liberties with the story, but I feel like I captured at least that character's point of view and told the story that way. And that way, I think the people got attached more emotionally than they would if I just kind of literally laid out the story as it was.
Right, and you kept to the spirit of it, absolutely. And I was actually just chatting with Jim just before this because I didn't really remember the details of Gray Matter very well, but I did remember Survivor Type pretty well. But Jim spelled it out for me, and it does sound like he did a really nice job of he brought it back for me, and I remembered. But of adapting that and focusing in on the character. I have to go back and read it now. But
yeah, the story. I mean, it's a really juicy piece of monster making, which I definitely went a different way with it, but I can really appreciate with a little bit more money and a little bit more, I guess, filmmaking skills in that area. Well, that's what I hope Red Clark's will be. I mean, from the trailer, it looks like something Stan Winston would do with it. It's kind of exciting.
Yeah, but James, I gotta ask, what was the material you used?
Yeah, what was that stuff?
Bathroom.
Oh yeah, that's kind of fun. Yeah, I mean, I kind of inspired by if you guys have seen Creepshow, I'm sure you have.
Yeah, sure. The Stephen King segment.
Exactly. Yeah, that kind of inspired me in terms of looks, and I was just like, I want it to look gross.
Yeah.
In a real unnerving way. So, working with my production designer Xavier Wilson, who is phenomenal. Highly recommend working with him if you're filmmakers out there. But he came up with this concoction of essentially random debris around the set, but also insulation foam and different types of paint. And it's just, I mean, it's really kind of like, you really could just go to Home Depot and get most of the stuff you need to make it, but it really read well on screen, which I think is, incredibly, I don't know, that's just the magic of cinema sometimes.
Yeah, right.
You see something in person, and you're like, oh, I don't know, is this gonna work? But then you see it on screen, and you're like, oh, no, it works, of course. So there you go.
So Thron, let's give you a chance now. Why don't you speak for you and Jim about, give us a little context on Last Run.
Oh, Last Run was something, because Jim and I met in high school and riding the same bus together. And so when we actually made that, how old was I? I was like 16, I think?
15.
15, yeah.
Well, we shot it in the summer of '86.
Yep. And Last Run was definitely, especially at the time, was a more of an outlier for Stephen King's work. It was like the one non-scary story in Night Shift.
And this was probably even before they did Stand By Me, right?
Yes.
Was it came out. Yeah. Stand By Me, I know I'm shut up, Jim, but Stand By Me actually came out in late August of '86, right about the time we wrapped principal photography.
Right.
So it was a wonderful affirmation that it could be done. You could adapt a non-horror Stephen King story.
Yeah, and Jim did a wonderful job adapting the script, and kept it certainly true to the heart of the story, I thought. And it was my first filmmaking experience, and so it was a huge learning time for me. I was really psyched.
Yeah, it's kind of it's sort of a mini classic in the world of dollar babies, I guess these days. So, do you have any idea how many dollar baby movies exist?
Go to the
Oh, right, of course.
They've exploded now.
Do you have? I mean, well, without looking at it, do you have a sense of how many?
75. I kid you not.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Seriously.
Stephen King has made $75 off of this?
$75.
Wow, he must be rolling in it. Does he actually cash the checks?
Yes.
Yeah.
I swear to God, one of the most exciting days of my life was when I got my bank statement in the summer of '86, back when they used to really send you back the real canceled checks, and on the back of the check, he hand signed it and endorsed it.
That's awesome. You still have
So
it.
I have Stephen King's autograph. It's just not on a book.
That's awesome. See, you got to send me a picture of that so I can post it.
Awesome.
All right, so let's see who wants to speak next. Who's eager?
Billy.
All right, we're going to pick on Billy now. Let's see.
That's what happens when you come late to the party.
That's right. Okay, so tell me. Let's see. I'll just throw out generic questions that each of you can answer in your own way. Cool. Okay. What would you say was one of the biggest challenges in adapting the story to script?
For Survivor Type, the way we chose to do it was through like a found footage sort of video journal kind of thing. that seemed like a really natural choice, given that the story is, itself like a diary.
Mm-hmm.
So we figured video diary is the best way to go. But in doing that, I mean, I kind of realized right away that we were going to have a movie that was like, 25, 30 minutes long of a dude talking into a camera, and that was it. So, like, right from the start, it was really about conceptualizing each scene, making sure that, like, the information was coming across, but also, like, keeping an audience engaged and interested and keeping the story moving forward and that kind of thing. So really, I would say the most difficult part for me was probably the adaptation. And just making sure that we were going to keep it interesting the whole time.
Well, see, what I appreciated about that is it's one of the few cases of a so-called found footage movie where it seems like it didn't feel forced that it was in that format.
Yeah.
Because it really bugs me when I see a movie like, for example, Chronicle. That's like did not have to be a found footage movie.
Yeah.
But this,
and I think a lot of people sort of use that as a crutch. Like, it's very easy to say, like, oh, if you shoot this found footage, it's going to be like 10% of whatever budget it's going to be if you shoot it with coverage and 3 cameras and all that stuff. And that's not wrong, but it's also like you lose a whole lot. So initially I resisted the idea of a found footage movie because I just didn't want to do that. But the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. And I was like, all right, well, that's the right choice. So I just got to figure out how to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's it just seemed like a perfectly natural way to approach that, which I'm actually surprised that the other adaptation was not done that way.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, they were sort of digging more into the backstory, and you see a lot of the drug dealing and that kind of stuff.
So do you know? So there's only one other adaptation that you know of that story?
I think there are 2. I saw a trailer for another one, but I didn't see anything after the trailer.
Nice. Okay. All right. So continuing to talk about script, James, what would you say were among the biggest challenges of adapting it?
The biggest challenge.
Well, James. Which James? All right. Well, James Cox got in there first, so I'm gonna let him talk. Go ahead. By a hair.
Well, I did co-write Gray Matter, but I really have to give the most credit to Clark Tomlinson, who I co-wrote it with. But it definitely, I think I don't know. I feel like I talked a little bit about this already, but finding the perspective and finding what was the heart of this story, because all the trappings are there, all the things I knew would work are there, by virtue of Stephen King's short story. But where did I find where I could put in my perspective and put the heart of this story in, and that was by doing the kind of adaptation tricks that I did with focusing it on the son and doing a Boy Who Cried Wolf parable with it. But I don't know, a little redundant, but. Jim, what do you say?
And Dan, feel free to talk over him too.
I'll tell you the most interesting thing about adapting Last Rung was we needed to find a location first. Dan may not even remember that we tried making it 1 year earlier. We actually shot about 3 reels of test footage in the attic of the Methodist church downtown that had post and beam that looked like a barn, just to see if it could be done, because we found the 2 kids who we knew. One is a little sister of a dear friend. The other is a great kid, or not a kid anymore, who we knew, through the middle high school. And we didn't have a barn. We couldn't make the movie without a real barn. And it's not easy to find a barn on Cape Cod. There are almost no farms left anymore. And the kids were actually, though ironically in 1985 they were almost exactly the ages of Larry and Kitty in the story, they were too green. They weren't really comfortable yet. And Dan and I kind of didn't necessarily say we were going to keep trying. We just kind of walked away. And this is where it really is fascinating, because
so you had the same kids at that point?
Yeah.
Cast? All right.
That's, in other words, the kids in the final movie were the kids we tested with the year before. Okay. But flash forward to me up at UMass in the spring of '86, and I see a oversized video box called The Night Shift Collection. 2 stories from Stephen King. The Woman in the Room and The Boogeyman.
Yeah, I don't remember where I saw that collection, but I guess
This
probably
is
in video
before
stores.
Before anybody knew who Frank Darabont was.
Right.
And I said, man, if they did it, why can't we?
Right.
At least that's what I recall.
Mm-hmm.
So when college was out in late May of '86, Dan and I pretty much wrote the script in one night, and we finally found a barn. And once we found a barn, we were off and running. And the only thing we kind of had to change in the story is we had no budget to do the wraparound. The story about Larry and Kitty and this dangerous game they play is reflected in this memory piece because as they grew up, they grew apart. And Kitty had a very hard life, and she became a prostitute, real happy stuff.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the story, she jumps from a building and dies. Yeah. And we had no budget to shoot those scenes. We didn't even have actors.
As I recall, you didn't even have the budget to shoot like a really high fall from the, drop from the ledge.
No, we did it. Dan and I did it all with camera work and editing to make you feel that there was a little bit of a second delay from the jump to the fall.
And I got to tell you, there's something so great because I just watched it. I actually didn't. I was just starting to watch it again before we talked about it. I've seen it several times in the past, but there's just something so I don't know, charming about that old actually being shot on film, and with these with the credits actually being shot in camera. It's just like, it's so cute.
Billy and James, you may not know that one thing that I was determined not to have were paper credits. When you're shooting with Super 8, there is no such thing as an optical printer. We couldn't even do dissolves.
Right, so talk about how you did that. Right.
Yeah, I got the idea to use a mirror and reflect the countryside and use rub-on lettering to create the credits.
And you're actually pulling the focus too,
great.
So it starts off.
I had the focus pull because if you're on the credits, the background's out of focus. So I started with each different credit with the background, the countryside in focus, and then did a focus pull and sharpened up the credits. Mm-hmm. Did it all in camera.
So cool.
Yeah.
Well, what I love about having no budget is it forces you to be smarter. It forces you to do things that you would never think you could do.
Yeah, absolutely.
It forces you to think through what you're doing is the main thing. And I love when, especially in Super 8, still looks good today. I think Super 8 looks awesome.
I know people are trying to make things look like Super 8.
Yeah, you have to run it through an After Effects plugin to do it now. And although I just saw in a camera article on how to turn your red into a Super 8, essentially. If you want to spend $200,000, here's a Super 8.
Just go to the thrift shop.
Well, this is where just one more story. I really got to give Dan credit as he has such a gift, not only as a director, but at age 15, his camera work was so astonishing. And I know he'll remember this story. There was one day where we were like, the Super 8 rolls, as you remember, were 3 minutes and about 20 seconds long. And there was not a left in camera to bother doing a full take with the kids. And Dan said, I got an idea. I want to try something. And I remember I sat, shame to admit it, I said, I don't think it'll work. And Dan said, well, let's try it anyway. And he actually shot upside down of Melissa, the little girl, jumping past the camera. And it is one of the best shots.
I remember that shot distinctly. Yeah, absolutely. I remember that. So let's talk about the actual shooting of each of your movies. Billy, how long did your shoot take?
Our shoot was 4 days.
Okay.
And it went pretty fast.
Where was that shot, by the way?
Malibu. We shot in Leo Carrillo State Park. There's one rock that sticks far enough out into the water where you can shoot 3 sides and you have ocean behind it.
Wow.
And it was big enough too so that you can shoot in sort of different spots and have a different visual aesthetic. So you're not just he's on a rock with the ocean behind him. There was a lot of different textures and spots that we could go to.
Right.
But the shooting was actually really bizarre because we would take a long time to set up for a scene, and it was just me and the actor Gideon Emery, and so we would sort of choreograph this whatever scene we were doing, and it would take us a lot longer than usual. But then we would shoot it. We'd do 3 takes, 4 takes, and we'd knock out like 3 pages of the script. Like, oh man, this is oddly moving very slow and very fast at the same time. And then once we got into the really heavy effects stuff, that took us a little while. But I mean, that stuff was so much fun.
Yeah.
The big one was the first amputation scene.
Oh God, I found that like unbearable. I was literally watching that through my fingers, sitting at my desk. I was like, oh, I have to watch this. I don't want to. I have to. Oh,
There's a great point about halfway through the movie that if we're watching it with an unsuspecting crowd and they don't know the story, there's this weird shift where people kind of like see where it's going and they're like, oh no, I don't know if I like this.
Yeah, and as I'm watching it, I was literally just imagining how an audience would respond to it, and I could just hear them squirming.
Oh, it's fantastic!
Yeah.
Like,
it's really awesome to see an audience turn on the movie like halfway through.
And I was like, because it had been actually a super long time since I had read that story, and then when that part came up, I was like, oh yeah, oh no.
Yeah.
In your own way, Billy. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, in your own way, Survivor Type has a lot in common with Misery.
Uh-huh.
That of
I thought of that
course,
too. With the
read
leg.
the novel, and when that scene came, even though they made changes, I was like, I would really like to go out into the lobby for a little while and come back.
Right.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to do, like when we started moving forward with the movie, I was like, well, if we're going to do this found footage and we're going to do this story, I mean, we can't pull any punches. It's got to be, we've got to give the audience what we're promising, which is you're going to see this stuff. It's going to be really gruesome. It's going to be in your face.
Right.
And it's going to be brutal.
And you got the blood kind of splattering the lens, like,
yeah.
Oh, God.
All of that was a happy accident too. We didn't even plan for that, but the rock that he was sitting on it pooled right under where he was cutting on the fake leg. So when he was hitting it with the rock, it all splashed up.
That was the worst moment for me when he takes the rock and just jams the knife down through the bone.
Yeah.
My God.
It's funny because that's actually not in the story. They don't talk about him breaking the bone, but I was sitting there looking at it and I'm like, you know what? I think he'd have to break the bone, and I kind of want to see that. Like, let's take it to the next level. We'll show that, and that part. People are already squirming, but then when the rock comes out, you hear a little, oh no, oh god.
Well, and there's a little bit of like, the kind of like they did in Alien, where the first gross out is so intense that you're just terrified it's going to happen again. So because the other amputations are not quite as in your face. I mean, they're kind of a little bit off camera. It's like the hand
they
is
start getting a little more off camera, like
which is fine, which is perfectly fine.
Yeah. Billy,
that was the argument.
Billy, it sounds like you kind of did the Jaws effect, where Spielberg knew he could get two screams in the movie, but no more, and you did the big one and then a little baby one after that,
Yeah, we have the leg, the first big leg amputation, which is like a minute and a half of just watching the dude cut his own leg off, which is really disturbing and jarring.
Does it disturb you still when you watch it, or are you just completely desensitized to it now?
I mean, it's creepy. I've got a little distance from it now. It's been a couple years that it's been screening, so like I don't watch it as often as I did. Mm-hmm. So every once in a while, if I'm watching it with new people, it's like, oh, this is really gross.
But
I'm
a weenie when
in the movie too. There's my favorite gag that we did, and it was oddly going back to the difficulty shooting. Mm-hmm. It was the one effect that didn't actually work on the day, which was the ear, where he just all of a sudden very quickly grabs a knife and slashes off his earlobe and pops it into his mouth, and I'm like, oh, that's gonna be so good if we can pull that off. But on the day, the knife wasn't sharp enough. We didn't want to cut our actors, so the knife wasn't all that sharp, and it wasn't cutting through the effect. It was pulling it off of his ear. But thankfully, when it did cut, the rest of the application snapped back onto his ear. And in editing, I was miraculously able to put an edit in there so that it looks completely convincing.
Yeah, because it's kind of pulling at the flesh a little bit while it's cutting.
Yeah. Yeah,
Billy, you can't see it, but you should see Dan Thron smile on video right now.
It's true, man.
You're a sick man.
That's true.
Yeah, but that one always gets a big reaction too. It's like the leg and then the ear.
Well, it's like you get, and at that point, it's becoming kind of darkly comic too. So it's
absolutely,
yeah. So, and actually, I wanted to say you mentioned the actor in all three of your films. The performances are outstanding. So I want to talk a little bit about how you each got your actors, starting
Adam
with...
that's a great question, but you didn't let James or me finish this question.
Oh, go.
You were asking about how long it took to shoot.
Oh my
James
God,
Cox.
I totally forgot about that. I got off on the gross out thing. Okay, James Cox, talk to me.
All right, so we actually had 4 days scheduled. This is the funny part, but we actually shot it in 3, and it was kind of by virtue of, well, money is always a factor, but we worked a lot faster than we thought we would, and part of that was we shot almost the whole movie in one house. Now, how do you pull that off? We actually were able to get a house. This was 2009. Housing crisis happens. There's a lot of rental homes that were suddenly vacant.
Oh, wow.
And we benefited from that.
Where was this?
This was in Long Beach.
Okay.
Long Beach, California. And we were able to occupy a house for not a whole month, but, a whole week, essentially. And we were able to build the doctor's office, and we were able to build all the different rooms in the in Daniel and Isaac's house. And it was perfect.
So you actually rented the place out, or did you get it like as a freebie, or what?
It was kind of a freebie.
Yeah.
My producer worked out a deal with the owners of the home, but it was kind of a favor, and they were also like, "Ooh, a movie,"
That's cool.
A movie's coming to live in our house for a week. How exciting!
So you had actually went ahead of schedule then.
We did. It did. Yeah, It worked out great, and it was now. Not everything went right. Now I'll kind of talk a little bit about casting, because that did impact our schedule a little bit. And we had to recast the father character, the crucial character who applies all the makeup and everything, the day before we started shooting. So to be continued. I'll continue that with the casting discussion. Okay. But that was definitely that was something that was pretty scary with how we shot.
Yeah, I'll bet. But actually, you mentioned that it wasn't entirely in one location, right? I mean, the school scene wasn't shot at that house, presumably, right? I mean, the principal's office.
The principal's office was actually at Chapman University. We got to use a professor's office for that.
Let's see. Okay.
And that is also where we built the 2 bathroom sets as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, we did a lot of doubling of locations as much as we could.
All right. Mr. Cole, you may speak.
Hello. And I want Dan to interact and interject here whenever he can. We never shot straight, like, back-to-back days. It was on average whenever we could match the schedules with our young actors and get the parents' permission. They were tremendously supportive. But most of the time it was just me, loading up the cameras and the kids and Dan, because Dan couldn't even drive yet.
And, couldn't drive until I was 37, Jim. It's okay.
I know. I was an old guy. No, I'm just saying. I'm just always so proud and amazed that we were all so young when we did this.
Yeah, yeah. And well, we can talk about the editing later. But
we'll get to the editing later. I would guess, I'd have to look in my journal, because I did keep very detailed journals back then, that it was about a 9-day shoot. We didn't push the kids hard. We would be there during an afternoon. It was very hot in the barn.
So what, like even 4 hours at a time?
Yeah, about 4 or 5 hours. We'd pack a lunch, bring it. It would get hot, too, because the 2 handheld lights, generated a lot of heat.
Right.
But we shot over about 9 days between July and August of '86. The only other interior location was the bedroom of my mother's original house here in Chatham. Ironically, the exterior of the house that you see, a farmhouse in the movie, was shot, 150 miles away in the Berkshires, which is what I love about the magic of film.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I did all the second unit shooting myself, all the credits and all the exteriors. Early in the movie, when Larry is talking with his little sister and they're sitting in the field, and he looks over at the barn, he's looking at a barn that's 250 miles away,
Yeah, right. The magic of cinema.
So yeah, it was mainly working around the schedules with the kids, but it was very relaxed. I didn't really ever feel any pressure except, keeping the kids safe. It is an old barn. Just a little side story. The barn was owned by a lawyer.
Oh, perfect.
He was 90 years old.
Okay.
And we knocked on his door and
so that makes him today, what, 130 something?
Yeah, exactly. But what was great about him being a lawyer is he was old school lawyer. Now think about it. We're asking to use his barn.
Yeah.
No liability. The kids could get hurt. And he said, oh, sure, go ahead.
We're going to have these extraordinarily hot lights next to bales of hay.
Yeah, I know. What could possibly... That's exactly what I was thinking of. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, the fire risk was, tremendous. But Any memories, Dan, in terms of, I mean, we'll get to other subject, but in terms of just anything specific?
Oh, I absolutely remember how hellish the inside of that barn was. It was just boiling,
July and
boiling all the
August.
time. Yeah, it's just like you come out of there with, because I mean, it was all just, you know, like we had so much hay in the barn, so much, you know, dust and garbage, and you come out of there and like your nose was entirely packed up with crud and filth, and it was a horrible time. And it was a wonderful, horrible time.
A wonderful, horrible
time. Yeah, we take breaks about every 45 minutes and open the big door and go out in the air, get some air. But we were just covered with hay. I mean, even Dan and I. In fact, the scene where Adam, who plays Larry, is hurriedly and desperately trying to build the hay pile underneath where his sister's hanging. One of my favorite shots is Dan was like behind the camera, and the hay is raining down on the camera lens.
Well, what was really great was that the kids were much more durable than we were. Like we wanted to close out of there much earlier than they did. Especially,
isn't it strange to think in retrospect that you guys were only like 5 years older than them?
Yeah, it's true, right? No,
exactly. Oh, those little kids.
Yeah, those little kids. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they were tremendous, and they would they especially Adam pushed to shoot longer and longer, which is really great, pretty amazing. Because most kids, when you work with them, professionally, that's pretty much the last thing they want to do.
Right.
Yeah, they spend more time in school, if I understand correctly.
Yeah. And the other thing that I want to point out for those of you who've seen the movie is, I sometimes feel bad for Adam because everybody always raves about Kate, about Melissa. And she had the easier part. She's the cute little sister.
Right.
And she was tremendous.
Yeah,
but
great.
Adam was the straight man. And he was amazing. Yeah. And despite all the technical limitations, despite all the things I'd love to go back and fix, I wouldn't touch one part of that movie in terms of the kids' performances, because they were perfect.
Okay, so now that we're talking about the kids, we'll start with you guys and then move on to the others. How did you end up acquiring them for the film?
Through school. We knew each other. This was such a small high school. My class was 52. That Chatham was a senior high school, and we met Adam because our senior play was Once Upon a Mattress, and he didn't have a really speaking part, but he was in the cast. Yep. And Melissa was the little sister of one of my friends, Glenn. And we just suddenly thought, geez, they're perfect. So it was really easy, actually.
And they were. Did they have some interest in acting? Did you know that they had some interest in acting?
Well, Adam did, certainly. Because Adam went on to do a lot of acting after we shot. He went off and did a lot of stuff in high school drama and also stuff like that. Melissa, not quite as much, but it was awesome to see that they were both incredibly just naturalistic. Yeah. They were just like, it worked incredibly well and very quickly.
And how do you? So did you? I mean, that was your first time directing actors of any kind, right?
Yeah.
Are you talking to me or Dan?
Well, both of you, really, working with actors of any kind.
No, because remember, I made my first movie at age 11 in
That's
fifth grade.
True.
That's right.
Yeah.
But it was a silent movie, but I had some experience.
And Jim, can you give us just like a 1-minute recap of what happened with Mac Attack, just for the world? So this is down for posterity.
Billy and James' story is unreal, and it's going in my memoirs. The first movie I ever made, and I actually co-directed with my best friend Alex, was about a mutant killer hamburger that killed all the teachers in my elementary school.
That's awesome.
And everyone went along with it. It took us an entire school year to make. It was, we're not talking just shooting a 3-minute reel. It was an edited, it had a score. It was a silent movie, but I mean, it was a serious film. I mean, it was a comedy, but I mean, we took a whole school year to shoot it. And I actually am still in touch with my 5th grade teacher, and I said, how could you justify letting me miss so much class to make this movie? And she said, because you were raking a real movie. I knew if you were kidding around, I would have put a stop to it. So when the film was finished, Greenwich was a town that had such an amazing film program in the public schools. They had a film festival every year for elementary and secondary. And our film got shown to an audience, and it got a standing ovation. I mean, I sat in the seat and cried. It was the most. I mean, that's when I knew this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. But when the film was finished, the town of Greenwich said, well, we own the movie. We paid for the stock, but we will let you make duplicates so you'll have a copy. Now, this is 1978. Most people didn't even have VCRs yet.
Of course.
All we had was black and white, 1-inch reel video. So by copy, I meant a actual film duplicate. So the town paid to have the film sent to Kodak, which God knows why wasn't in New York City. It was up in like, Rochester or Buffalo, New York. I kid you not. The film was destroyed because the plane carrying the movie and the copies and hundreds of other films, the pilot had a heart attack and the plane went down in upstate New York.
Oh, gosh.
There is nothing left of the Big Mac attack except a few scraps of outtakes. That's it. I have no record of it. If you could plug into my brain like Brainstorm, I could play the whole movie for you.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, Jim and I actually worked together previously on a film because we also did Sponge together, which Jim directed, which is about a mutant sponge. Which is hilarious and one of my favorite short films. But I didn't get to do any directing of actors in that
Now,
one.
is that up on Vimeo?
No, I got to transfer it. I have to transfer my stuff. I'd really love to get that up there.
Yeah.
Sponge was basically, it took me years to really realize that Sponge was my attempt to remake Big Mac Attack.
Yeah.
And it worked beautifully because it won 2 national awards. Back then there were film contests for teenagers held out in Hollywood, and it won both of them. First place.
Wow.
So I was very proud.
Yeah, that's an awesome movie. I love that. That's one of the funniest.
I got to get it digitized.
See, yeah, because we did that with Frank LaLoggia. We got his school film up on YouTube, and I'd love to do that with like everybody that I possibly can because I just think it's hilarious. But and often surprisingly good. So, all right, let's see who wants to go next. Talk about what were we talking about? We were talking about the actors. We were talking about how you obtain the actors. Okay, so let's talk to James.
Sure.
Okay.
So we had a couple of challenges. Again, working with kids and working not in 1987 with kids, but working with and kids in 2009.
Oh, and let me interrupt though, just for the audience, so they can keep track. We're talking about gray matter here.
Yeah, that's correct.
Go.
And also doing it through a film school that has all kinds of liabilities and such. We had to figure out how we were going to shoot with kids and not have them, or a kid. In this case, it was Tyler Chase, who at the time was 17 but legal 18. He was actually had special work arrangements, so we didn't have to have a on-set teacher and all that kind of stuff. Which I'm totally supportive, and I think it's definitely necessary for film sets when you have minors, but when you have practically an adult on set,
right?
It could have gotten.
Presumably, I mean, you're talking about like a 3 to 4 day shoot, right? I mean, couldn't you just do it on the weekends?
Yes and no. I mean, we actually had to shoot because of our location and different things involved. We had to shoot, I believe it was a Wednesday through Friday.
Oh, I see.
But yeah, I mean, it was also during the summer, so we probably wouldn't have had so many constraints. But it was definitely something that we didn't want to have to go through all the paperwork and everything for if we could avoid it. So Tyler Chase, fortunately, he was a special situation, and we were able to avoid a lot of that problem.
And how did you find him? Because I mean, he was just fantastic.
Yeah, his performance was incredible.
He worked on a short film previously with my producer Andy Hamamoto, and I was actually very lucky that he was available because at the time I believe he was working on a Nickelodeon show. He was doing what all the young actors are trying to do is get on TV, and most recently he was on The Walking Dead, which was pretty awesome.
Oh,
but
wow.
Yeah, he got eaten, but
that's part.
Oh yeah, no. What I loved was talking to him about it, being like, man, this is one of those shows where I really don't know if you're going to be on next week, and it won't be, just because they didn't write you in. It's because, you can get eaten, you can get shot, anything can happen. So yeah, no.
So did you actually hold auditions, and is that how you got him, or?
For Tyler, no. Tyler, we knew through.
Oh, you said that. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Through Andy.
Right.
We did hold auditions for all the other roles.
Mm-hmm.
And we found somebody I really loved for the dad, who day right before our shoot. I won't mention his name, but the day right.
He'll never work in this town again.
Yeah, that's right, because I have that kind of power. The day right before this shoot, he took another job, and that's always a risk when you're a student filmmaker. You're not really offering, big bucks for working with you on your film, but you kind of hope that somebody will honor, the idea of, a commitment. But in this case, no.
Well, can I ask you? Did you actually pay these guys?
I believe it was all deferred.
Oh, okay.
So
when it makes its big profit, then you'll start paying.
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's a non-for-profit film, isn't it?
Yeah, right. So deferred payment on a non-for-profit film. How does that work?
Exactly. Well, they were happy to work on on the film in general. So it was just we had to work out an arrangement with SAG is really what it was all about.
Right.
But actually it all turned out, I think, for the best, because Rob Pattinson was perfect for this role, and he actually knew Tyler. They did a lot of improv together, so their chemistry was something that they had actually nurtured and worked on, well before I got involved. So these guys were really comfortable with each other, and I think their rapport as a father and son has less to do with me as a director and more to do with them as actors and having had that kind of pre-existing relationship. So
they were great.
And the principal, how was the principal cast?
The principal, Alan Troutman. This is an embarrassing story for me, because literally I just picked him out of I had a casting director do, a bunch of, sessions with actors, auditions, and he came in and I picked him, and this is kind of funny. I picked him because he looked just like my gym teacher from elementary. And I was like, yeah. I hated that guy.
I don't even care if you can act.
Totally going to work. But of course, if you look
that's
him
actually
up on
not. That's actually. Sorry, I'm sorry.
I was
going to say that's not that. Shut up, Jim.
It's all right. You're among friends. Go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I was going to say the way you picked. Actually, that's a lot of times the way casting does. In The Night Before, which I wrote and Jay Holben, fellow Dollar Baby, directed, and that's a story in itself of how two Dollar Babies made a film together. We were looking for the lead surgeon for this movie with the 3 kids in the hospital. The reason we hired the guy we hired is he was the only one that could pronounce extrophy correctly.
Perfect.
Everyone else was saying, every other actor was saying extrophy, and when this guy said extrophy, I looked at Jay, and Jay went, "You're hired."
Oh man, yeah. I mean, sometimes it comes down to that. I mean, in this case, I was looking at a lot of reels, and then this guy he's stuck in my head. Now, his performance is great, and I did not know this when I cast him, but he is also a very featured zombie in a certain movie called Return of the Living Dead, which I love.
That is the second time that has come up in my podcast. Which one was that? When I was talking to... it was you.
Yeah. Well, it's one of my favorite movies. That's why.
It was you.
There, man.
Right. Wow, it's amazing. It's following me.
I actually knew James Karen. Isn't James Karen in Return of the Living Dead?
I'm not sure. I don't know enough about a movie that I love, unfortunately.
Well, no, but is this the one from 1985?
Yeah, the semi-comedy one, comedy horror one.
Yeah, the semi-comedy. Yeah, the actor James Karen, who was the boss in Poltergeist.
Oh, right.
Right. Yeah, right. He was actually interested in my feature script and was wanted to act in it, but we just couldn't get any backing.
It's a story for a lot of films, isn't it?
Yeah, really.
Now, can you correct me if I'm wrong? That movie, it was actually the first time that zombies ever said that they wanted to specifically eat brains. Is that true? I just heard that the other day.
And guess who said it? Alan Troutman.
Wow, that's a real place in history.
I know. Working with this guy, and it came to the day on set when we had lunch. It's lunch in the middle of the shooting day, and I just sat next to him, and I was just talking him up, and just kind of like, hey, and he's like, I'm surprised, something. I'm trying to remember exactly how it came up, but it was like,
something so integral to the mythology is like.
Yeah. I had no idea it was him, and I think I must have started talking about the movie, and there was kind of this weird moment where he's like, wait. I was that guy, right? Like I kept talking about the Tar Man as some other person, and I was like, what's that guy's name? Who played that character? I don't know.
Me?
Yeah. He's like, me? Yeah. And it was such an awkward moment because I was like, Oh.
Wait, so this is the guy? Because when I watched, we're getting really off on a tangent here, but I mean, there's an extra on the, there's a behind the scenes thing on the DVD of it, and they talk about how like he had to be really, really skinny to,
yes.
that was the guy.
That's him. That's Alan Troutman.
And that's the end of part 1. We'll see you next time for part 2 of the Dollar Baby Roundtable.
Visit anywherebuthollywood.com and join the community.